I'm going to start rolling some tape. You ready to go?
Yes, I am.
All right.
The audio's good.
Yeah. I hope so. It's we use Sony Vegas, which I like better than Pro Tools or Adobe, unless you use Adobe. So forgive me for that.
Well, I have Sony Vegas, which I use for my video editing, and I also have Adobe Premiere, and I have Adobe Audition. But I'll tell you the latest versions. I helped develop that program. Back when it was Cool Edit Pro, and then I stayed on to help them. In fact, the guy who wrote the software, David Johnston, he had it as it was Cool Edit.
Oh yeah,
it was a 2-track piece of shareware that he was selling for $25, and he was in Phoenix at the time, and I contacted him and I said, David, this is really very good. It has some nice little effects to it. I said, it just has one problem. It's not a multi-track. It's just, just a 2-track recorder. And I said to him, you could sell a lot of these if you were to make it multi-track. And he said, well, how would I do it? And I said, well, I'd keep the edit window. I'd keep the 2-track side. And then I would have an additional port that you could port out the multi-track. And he said, well, how many tracks should I have? And I said, well, at least 8. I said 8 would work well. I said, if you can do more, then that's good. I said, but 8 is a good basic level. And we talked back and forth periodically. And then one day a FedEx truck rolled up in front of my house, and it was from David. And inside was an unlabeled CD, and I loaded it up in my computer, and son of a bitch, it was Cool Edit Pro. And I called him and I said, I'll be damned, you actually did it. And I said, not only that, it's a lot more than 8 tracks. And he said, well, I made it so that it can handle as many. At that time, it didn't have an MP3 encoder.
Mm-hmm.
I had a separate MP3 encoder, which was called right-click MP3, which I would do. And nobody, by the way, absolutely no one was doing MP3s. And I had only done it because I found out about a company in Germany, the Fraunhofer Institute, that was developing audio compression software. And I found out about this right-click MP3 thing, which was a header, a UI, user interface for an encoder. And so anyway, I loaded up Cool Edit Pro, and he said that he wanted to make it so that it would work with as many tracks as your computer could handle. And I said, this is going to work great. So anyway, over a period of time, he kept adding new things to it, and eventually put an MP3 Pro on there as an encoding. And originally, it was he charged like an additional $25, I think, for the MP3 Pro. But that was because I think he had some costs that came with that. But then ultimately, Adobe bought him out. I think they paid him $5 million.
Wow.
And Adobe asked me to stay on as an advisor, which I did for a few years. But after, and I have all the versions, every version I've got. So if somebody calls me, I even have Cool Edit Pro loaded up. Because there are a lot of people out there still using Cool Edit Pro.
Anybody still using Fast Eddie?
I have no idea.
That was the first one I remember working on here at the station years ago, the 1-track editor. I remember somebody relabeled it the WIMP editor after we got SAW program.
I used SAW, I used Samplitude, I used all of them. I mean, my foray into digital editing goes way back. I remember in 1989, I asked the engineer at K-Earth, I said, hard disk is a magnetic medium, right?
Mm-hmm.
I said, yeah. I said, then why can't they develop software that allow you to edit audio on a computer? And he said, nobody in their right mind would want to edit audio on a computer. But then I started looking around and seeing if there was anyone who was doing that. And I found these guys up in Seattle, Washington. This predates Cool Edit. And I found these guys up in Seattle, Washington, and they had developed this outboard piece of gear that they were selling to musicians. It cost like $17,000. And I believe right about the same time, Orban had come out shortly after that with their editing system. Orban used a RAM-based program, and these guys were using something that actually ported over to a hard drive, so that if you accidentally unplugged your computer, it would still be there. But if you did that with the Orban piece of gear, as the power went down, so does your whole session and everything on it. But unless you'd backed it up.
Mm-hmm.
But I called those guys, and they sent me to a representative here in L.A., a British guy, who went through the whole system, and it was nice. It was a very nice system. And they said, we'll give you a system if you'll be our representative here in L.A. And answer questions that people might have. And I said, sure, what the hell, why not? $17,000 piece of free gear, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So I had that here, that was in 1992, I believe. I had that here for about a year, maybe 2 years. And I kept scouring the internet at that time, looking to see if there was anyone else doing it. And that was when I happened across the MP3 encoder with Fraunhofer, and then shortly after that ran into Cool Edit. And the company that had the gear up in Seattle had sold all their gear to, I can't remember what keyboard company it went with, and the local representative here was fired, and they also denied him any severance, and they denied him his health benefits. And he came over here to tell me that he was no longer going to be, with the company. And he told me his story. And I called him up, and I said, you guys come and get your stuff. I said, I don't like dealing with people who treat people badly. Well, you don't want to keep the system? And I said, no, I don't want to deal with any company that treats people the way you do.
Yeah.
And so they sent somebody over and picked up all the gear, but I had already started using Cool Edit, just because most of my work is really just for doing just voiceover stuff. But segueing to current times, the best gear, the best version of Adobe Audition is version 3. And because later versions of Adobe Audition became too heavy on the code, and I think that they tried, and they're still trying to appeal to a wide group of people who do audio for video and so on, which is not a bad thing.
Mm-hmm.
But for radio, the purpose of radio, it is a bad thing, because you want to be able to fire up your session, record your voice track, and then port it out to the multi-track and add all your effects and music and everything else that you need to do. But the later versions of it, which really is very annoying, when you load up an audio file, for instance, you start recording something, it asks you to name it first. Screw that. I might not even keep that track. I don't need to name it. And there are little things in the later versions of the program that slow the work down. And I work really fast. And having to deal with a system that is going to cause me more pain in the ass than anything, I'm just not into it. Have I used the other versions? When I have to, but usually I use Adobe Audition 3.0.
Okay, yeah, because I worked on 1.5, I think, at Cumulus for the gathering of the clips. And then there was a computer that had the most updated version of Adobe. And the problem with that one was on the 1.5, you could record and then you could actually highlight a portion that you'd already recorded and save that into an MP3. However, on the most recent Adobe, you had to stop it in order to extract that part you wanted to make into an MP3. And that was really inconvenient, especially with basketball, where you constantly have to have it rolling. With football, not so bad because you could just stop it during the break, extract it, and then save it. But with basketball being constant back and forth, you don't want to lose anything or any opportunity or any type of play-by-play that you might miss because you were trying to extract the MP3 right there. So that's very, very interesting. Well,
I think that probably the big problem with Adobe Audition in recent years is they're trying to compete with Pro Tools, and that's just screwy. Because if you got Adobe Premiere, it automatically will port out to Adobe Audition, and I think that's exactly what they're trying to do is make a Pro Tools, which is very Avid links up with Pro Tools, and Adobe Audition links up with Adobe Premiere. So that's the kind of thing they do there.
Interesting. Well, it's kind of funny. Like, I remember somebody works on Final Cut Pro for, movie editing and TV editing. And they thought, okay, Final Cut Pro 10 is really great. Now here's 11 and 12. That's going to be even better. Then we find out later on that 11 and 12 don't have features that 10 did. And a lot of people were upset. It's like, wait a minute, it doesn't have this, doesn't have that. That was something that was really pertinent, very important for me as far as my editing was concerned. So a lot of people felt, kind of taken to the cleaners on that one. Well,
I have Final Cut. I never use it. I have used it, but when they went to the latest version, I said, no, this is just not going to work. And you couldn't. I don't believe I could be mistaken, but at the time when they brought on the newer version, you couldn't take sessions from the old version and bring them into the new version, which I thought sucked. So I always, I just stuck with Adobe Audition on the Windows side. I have the in my audio editing program, audio system downstairs. I have two 27-inch monitors, and I have the Mac trash can. It's got dual video cards. It's got SSDs and all of the bells and whistles. But it's while it works great, it's still outdated by today's standards. But it works just fine for me. And I've got it in a dual boot system where I can boot to Windows or I can boot to the Mac side. Depending on what's needed.
Definitely.
But I am a bit of a geek when it comes to technology. I just love it.
Well, technology definitely is a wonderful thing. It's always neat seeing those newest gadgets and gizmos. Now, here at the station where I work currently, the board is pretty much your standard board. It's a good board. But there's other boards like at Cumulus where it's, these electronic displays for each of the buttons. They're labeled a certain name, and I thought it was just the coolest thing in the world. Oh my goodness, you could actually change the name.
Boards like that.
I'm like, now what kind of board do you usually use in your production?
I use a Harris Airwave Digital.
Okay.
It's a great board. I've had it for a long time, and I actually sent it off to Harris and had it redone, and it really didn't need much done to it. But they repainted it with everything and redid everything. I mean, it works beautifully. I'm the only user here. I get a lot of people ask me. In fact, I did some work for Canadian Broadcasting Corporation, and their engineer called and said, "What in the hell are you using in your audio chain?" And I laughed and I said, "Not much." And he said, "Well, it sounds fantastic." He said, "What are you using?" I said, "Well, it's a Sennheiser 416 going into a very inexpensive 286S." And he said, "Well, it sounds really good." I said, "Well, you could have the same thing. The DBX is about $200, maybe a little more." I said, "It's cheap." I said, "The key is setting it correctly. You have to set it correctly, and once you get the settings like they're supposed to be, I have 3 of them. I've got one portable, and I've got one in my studio in Oklahoma, and they really are very clean. I also have other processors that I never use. I've got I've got an Avalon, and that thing costs about $4,000. I have that going. My Neumann U87 AI, which is a gold anniversary version. I paid $5,000 for. That goes into the Avalon, but I just barely use it because I just like the sweet sound of this 416. The other thing that's great about a 416, it's a shotgun mic used in film work, and I think I have 3 or 4 of them, and the 416 is a very directional microphone. So I think a lot of people might not know how to use it because they get off azimuth, and if you get off azimuth, then it sounds a little tinny, or it can sound not sonically. It just doesn't sound right. But where the 416 is really great is if you've got someone in your neighborhood and they've got a barking dog or somebody's mowing their lawn, it will not pick it up. It only picks up what's in front of it.
Wow.
And that's where it really, really works well. At my mother's place, I have a separate building, which is a great little building that I built a studio in. And the next door neighbor has a loud barking dog, and it doesn't get on my recording.
Yeah, it's funny. Years ago, I used to dub Chinese films into English, and sometimes the dog next door, because it was done at somebody's house, you hear the dog barking in the background of the film, but the editor kept it there because it kind of sounded natural to the film. But it was, or when I worked at NBC Sports Radio, Kate Delaney did her show from her house, from her, I think either living room or a spare bedroom, and sometimes you'd hear the dog barking in the background. Well, it adds to the ambiance, but obviously when you're doing voiceover, you don't want to have a dog in the background unless the dog is used for something like, canines will love it.
Yeah, it's good when it's supposed to be there, but not so good when it isn't,
Exactly.
Pretty crazy times, though. I really have had a lot of fun working in this studio. I mean, it really is. It's got everything in it, everything. And I made a promise to myself that if I ever got to where I could make a living doing voiceover, that I would have all the toys.
Mm-hmm.
And the funny thing about that is that when you have all the toys, you realize at some point that those toys should probably be used sparingly. We shouldn't use everything at once. It's one thing to try to be a Spielberg, but it's another thing to abuse the amount of effects that you use in your work.
It's kind of like, it's interesting you mention that, because especially with movies where the blowback against CGI has kind of happened, because CGI was being so overused that it was just like so unrealistic. You didn't really believe the movie. It just looked like animation instead of reality. And so there's some filmmakers that are going back to using real, camera with real people, real effects, real objects instead of something created by a computer. And you can tell the difference. Like, for instance, the Starsky and Hutch movie they made back about 15 years ago, it was supposed to be a prequel to the series. That's how they wrote it. But what they did is they used very little CGI, even though that was the big thing even back then. They decided to use camera techniques that were done back in the 1970s to make it look genuine, make it sound like you were really in the 1970s, rather than trying to do something else. And it worked. I mean, it looked like, you were actually in the 1970s. So unfortunately, it didn't become a trend back then, but it's kind of becoming one now. Kind of like the big blowback about 20 years ago against the boy band teen bop craze, when you had groups like the Strokes, the Hives, the Vines, the White Stripes, that were recording, using guitars, bass, drums, and reel-to-reel tape from the 1960s, using the 1960s recording techniques to get your music, and also keeping mistakes in there, which these days Obviously, with voiceover, you obviously can't do mistakes. You have to correct them. But like with music, it used to be sometimes they just keep the mistakes in the song and made it sound great. But now they have to have the perfect sounding song.
Yeah. It's amazing, though, how things have changed over the years and from the standpoint of a timeline, it has evolved quicker than you could imagine. Think about the things that we now have, technically, that we didn't have in the 1980s. And it has changed a lot. And I think that one of the big problems for people who are my age, they sometimes don't keep up with the technology and don't keep up with what's going on. So if they wanted to work at a radio station, then going back to after they've been away for a while is a problem because there's an adjustment period. You know, they're not used to all the digital equipment. But on the other hand, there are people who are my age who have, because radio is a technical world, have kept up with things even if they do not, even if they don't have a job in radio. There are a lot of people. I did a commentary on it the other day about how people who are of retirement age are not retiring.
Mm-hmm.
AARP came out with a story that said that 1.7 million people who are of retirement age are still in the workforce, and many. I think that's really a low number. Many of them are doing things online. Sometimes they're doing voice tracking for radio stations, and sometimes they're doing voiceovers. You look at someone like Ernie Anderson, the late Ernie Anderson.
Mm-hmm.
He worked on into his 70s, and when you consider that the voice really does not reach its level of maturity until about 40 or 45,
mm-hmm.
and if you can keep your voice up, if you can take care of it, not do stupid things, then you should be able to work, on through your 70s. Although I think a lot of people might think seriously if they've got enough money socked away to kind of take a break and do something else. But you do have that option. I asked Frankie Lane once, the singer. He's dead now.
Mm-hmm.
He was in his 80s, I believe, and I was backstage with him. He was at the college campus up in Northridge doing a show up there, and I was backstage, and I said, "Frankie, you sound now just like you did back in the 60s, when you did this." He did the theme from Rawhide, and I said, "How are you able to keep your voice fresh, sounding just like you always did?" And he said, "I sing all the time." And he said, "Your voice is an instrument. It's a muscle, and you have to exercise that muscle. You've got to keep it exercised." He said, "I sing in the car, I sing everywhere, and I constantly keep that muscle exercised." And he said, "So when I go on stage and I'm singing professionally, my voice is pretty much the same."
Mm.
I also met Tony Bennett, and he said essentially the same thing. Although recently his voice is not what it once was. But he's, what is he, 80? How old is he?
He's in his mid-90s now. Yeah, he was, unfortunately he has dementia, but about a year or so ago he was doing concerts, and so he was still able to remember the songs he sang. And, when he was told you're going to be singing, he's like, "I am." And then an hour later, he's on stage singing with, the likes of Lady Gaga.
Yeah, I saw that show. I went to that show.
Oh, that must have been awesome. Because, I didn't really think much of Lady Gaga for the longest time. But then when I saw her on the Super Bowl halftime show about 5 years ago, I thought, oh, my goodness, forget the electronic stuff. You should be doing standards. That's your wheelhouse. That's, where you're really, you're right for.
96, I just checked.
Wow.
96.
And so, plus Lady Gaga's real name is actually Stephanie Germanotta, which is a great name. It's like,
it is.
It's like,
it really
dude,
is.
what do you, Gaga is like Stephanie Germanotta. That's a great name. That's a terrific name. You should be going by that, not Lady Gaga. When I think about that, all I can think about is the Queen and song "All We Get Is Radio Gaga," which I love, but it's like I don't see as a name.
Where she got it, it's really funny because I was watching this Japanese superhero. I don't know what you call it, but it's called The Fable.
Mm-hmm.
There are two of them. There's the original Fable, and then there's the Fable, the man who killed, who couldn't kill, or something like that. But I was watching the first movie, and a Lady Gaga song was in the closing credits, and I went, "Wait a minute, how old is that song?" I had to go and look to see when that record came out, and then I compared when this movie came out, and they both came out about the same time. So it could be when that song came out, she was trying to get more publicity on it on the worldwide stage. But she's really terrific. I mean, whether you like her politics or not, mm-hmm. she's really a terrific talent. I mean, she truly is.
She definitely is, and it's so much of today's music. I mean, Bob Seger was right. His song "Old Time Rock and Roll" means more today than it did back when it was released. But you still have the gems out there. You still have good singers here and there, and I just wish more of them were featured on radio more often than they are, instead of just like the overnight sensation that's here today, gone tomorrow. But I guess it's kind of always been that way. This is the Talking Archive. My name is Josh Jacobs. We're talking with Jeff Davis, and next time we'll find out about his childhood as well as his journey into radio.